Hello, welcome to a new episode of our podcast, Lead the Future, Change the Conversation. Unedited, honest conversation to create the future. I'm Arjan Visser, Futurist and your host. And join me as I chat with my dear friend Matt Goddard on self leadership, future, and peers. Matt is the founder of 3626 and an executive coach to CEOs who want more humanity in their leadership. Matt, thank you for joining me again on the podcast.
It's an
And
absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you.
well, I am really excited because you already gave me a heads up that you wanted to talk about the book.
Yeah.
And my previous experiences are that people give me hard questions, and normally I like to do that.
Yeah, and it makes it really easy for me because I don't have to answer the hard questions. Well, that's
Wow,
not
bounce
entirely
it back.
true.
I will bounce it back.
As I'm saying, that's not entirely true because I'm sure you'll hold the mirror up
Yeah,
in your response. But yeah, lovely to read your book. Lovely to work through the steps and journey with you in a kind of virtual way through reading the book and hear your voice in each of the steps. And so, yeah, reading through them, I think the ones that really resonated with me was step 4 and 5,
hmm, yeah,
and particularly around step step 4. It makes sense to start there, I guess. And why it resonated with me? Well, there's this quote that is attributed to J. Abraham, which is people are silently wanting to be informed, acknowledged, given advance opportunity, and led to action.
mm,
And so, step 4, in some respects, is about taking action, but really taking action in relation to your developmental and future network.
yeah,
And so, my tricky question for you, if I may, is um, thinking about the future, thinking about my future development or your future development. There's this old saying that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And if that's true um, for you, what would be the implication?
yeah. Well, that is a question that I would agree with, that quote, or actually fully disagree with. Um, the old consulting answer was always, it depends.
Mm,
And I think that that counts for this one as well. Like the chapter is about identify your circle.
mm,
Um, and there are different circles, you could say. There is this circle where you step in your authority, have influence, have effect on people, because you enter, you step up, something becomes possible that wasn't. Well, that would be my argument that I disagree. That happens only in the room when you will change the room temperature.
mm,
And I would say I don't like the language. You're the smartest person in the room, but you're the person in the room who has the most influence. So you
mm.
change the atmosphere, context, culture, metaphorically, the room temperature for good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
I think there's always been a phrase that I heard from Donna de Silva, which was, check yourself as you go into the door, as you go in the room.
yeah.
Which is, check the temperature that you're walking into and also check the temperature you're bringing with you
Yes.
in terms of the atmosphere,
Yeah.
which is a lovely piece of and wise sage advice.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I get that in terms of being an influencer. And yes, we're all in rooms where we're being an influencer of some shape or form. That could be both positive and negative in influencing up or influencing down in some respects. I guess my question is if we're talking about, as Carol Dweck might say, having a growth mindset, thinking about the
Hmm.
future circles,
Yeah.
then if I'm looking to grow, then being in the room where everybody else, and it does sound a bit egoic and a little bit arrogant saying I'm the smartest person in the room, But if there are people but what I've noticed is that people, when they go through a development process, much like you've suggested in your book, and thank you for suggesting that. But when they go through that, they realize that actually their circle of influence changes, and actually sometimes they have to take a positive and intentional step to change their circle, because with the best will in the world, and not trying to be elitist in any way, they find that the conversations that they're having are changing, and the conversations that they are um, engaging in are both um, can be both stretching for them and stretching for others. And so, if you are the person who is always doing the stretching of others and not being stretched yourself, I guess that's the point. Is that then you need to upgrade your network, which I think is what you're saying in your step 4. Would that be fair?
Um, that is the many dimensions in your question, actually. Like, uh, that would be chapter 4, A, B, and C, and maybe D.
Okay.
Well, you know, um, to unravel it a bit, if you are in an environment where you're the only one who has the contribution,
Mhm,
you will still learn
mhm,
because you're the biggest student of your own teaching.
yeah.
So it's not that you will not learn. But we also tend to say, if you want to learn, surround yourself with people that you want to learn from.
Mhm,
But that's another circle than the circle you have influence.
mhm,
So I would not say the one or the other. They both have a different purpose.
yeah.
The For personal development and working and self-reflection and self-discovery, you, your previous great circle maybe turns into your nightmare circle, and then you get all the triggers which are huge value that you
Mhm,
can work on, like in the development process. Now, if life is a rhythm with ups and downs, you have to let go
mhm,
your understanding of how it has worked in the previous. You have to unlearn things. The triggers comes from an environment where you don't feel valued anymore, or and that sounds bit it sounds not a bit very uncomfortable, but when you are in a toxic environment, you get the most triggers for your self discovery and your personal growth. If you are in an environment where you are put on a pedestal, you get no triggers.
mhm,
You will not learn, will not self discover. You will actually will think too highly of yourself. The empire
yeah.
is close, and somewhere in between, you navigate
Mhm,
in your personal journey, and then you have your learning where you reach out to other groups,
mhm,
and then you have the place where you have influence, where you're celebrated. So there are places where you're celebrated, there are places where you're seen and heard, there are places where you are ignored, and there
mhm,
are places where you are the student in the back of the room. I would not choose for any above the other. They all
mhm,
have a valuable place. Um, so the story is too simple to say find a tribe
mhm,
that fits your next stage. Actually, I would think don't find a tribe if you want to grow, because a tribe is just needed in one stage of growth.
mhm,
And the complexity we talk about right now, because they're not easy answers, definitely don't fit in that find where you fit in. No, it's like find where you grow, whatever that positive, negative. So the growth mindset where you connected to is outside of the comfort zone,
mhm.
which could easily mean that it feels hostile in some days of the week.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think part of where we grow the most is where we're able to sit in the discomfort of something
Yeah.
and allow that to process itself, rather than feeling, oh, we must escape this feeling of discomfort. which
Yeah.
is our natural kind of human instinct, is to kind of fight or flight. But actually being able to sit in the discomfort, and something that you were saying there about actually being in a room where people, you might be considered the, let's say, the influencer in the room, but you can learn from everybody else in the room. It's something that Byron Katie teaches, is that everybody is our own personal teacher,
Yeah.
because they cause us to have those reactions, which then give us the opportunity to do the internal work and go, oh, I notice that I'm having a reaction to this. Why am I reacting to it? What is driving my egoic reaction to this situation? And it made me think about, actually, if you are thinking about the medieval court, the person who may have been the smartest person in the room in those situations may have actually been the jester, because it's the jester who, through poetry or through kind of messing around and appearing to be the idiot in the room, would be the one that would ask the king the difficult questions. Because anybody else asking the question, or the queen in that sense, the king or the queen may lose their head, whereas the jester can kind of ask it in a kind of playful, almost a parable type of way,
Yeah.
that actually then creates a little bit of discomfort in a playful way, that actually then helps the, if you like, the person of influence to reflect.
Well, if you connect that to what you said, the smartest person in the room, that's probably the person who asks the questions,
Mm,
facilitates the reflections and the insights, the process, maybe creates the process around the decision making.
mhm,
But in most cases, he's not the one who has the answers.
mhm,
And I think that's where it goes wrong, when the smartest person in the room also has the answers, because then it becomes a setup to enforce their own opinion.
yeah,
And I would not call that a healthy way of leadership.
and being the expert can sometimes create a certain bias towards in the people in the room wanting to hear the expert's view, rather than finding a solution themselves, because it can
Yeah.
sometimes make us acquiesce, or give up our ability to be curious because there's an expert in the room. It's like we must hear what the
Yeah.
expert has to say, rather than doing some experimentation and some discovery ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that too. Yeah. Yeah, so that is a bit the underlying fault about chapter 4.
Mm,
But chapter 4 has the additional dimension that there are people in your network
hmm
who can accelerate you to where you want to go in your development, your horizon. So they can be the sponsor, they become the accelerator. They could also easily be the sabotage for your development,
hmm
because you're both investing in a relationship that keeps each other hostage, because the stage of life of walking together is actually ending. And then there are the people that you really love. They are not in the place where you want to go, but
hmm
you want to take them with you. And I think those people in your life could be your spouse, your business partner, could be the people you lead, your family, could be your clients. They are the ones that you want to have real relationship, because they matter now, tomorrow, and where you want to go.
hmm
And unfortunately, time is limited, time is a constraint.
hmm
So let's spend our energy for what matters. And who
yeah,
you are today will be different, or who you will be tomorrow. you know there will be a fuller version of you. The same goes with the people. So
hmm
if you and I decide to travel together, oh, pops to mind, to Rome, you know we only have to agree on the destination, and then we both pack our stuff. We're both different. We know that we don't want to change each other to look like ourselves. But there's one thing: we will be both different when we arrive from who we were when we left. Because the journey, the experience, that's where the learning, that's where the change comes. Well, the same is with our personal development. I mean, finding out who we are, finding out what our emerging authority is, if we move closer to our perspective, we will change.
Mm.
So, a
Yeah,
shared
no,
horizon, a shared destination in that perspective example, uh, well, needs to be a place where it's interesting for both.
I think that's true. And I think, yes, you can be, let's say, the smartest person in the room. You can still learn. I think actually where I've learned the most is where I've been um, in a room where there are smarter people, and they've challenged me and my thinking. And so I know that being in a group where um, we are perhaps peers in terms of um, growth and development, but also peers as in terms of context, that iron sharpens iron kind of
Yeah.
perspective is enormously helpful. Um, the only thought I had about going to Rome and packing the same things is we might dress the same, but I might have a little bit of a follicle challenge to actually look the same.
Yeah, and you will take some more sun cream with you. I know, but
You're blessed with a lovely head of hair, unlike myself.
yeah, yeah. Well, I will save some for you. You can borrow
Oh, thank you.
it. Yeah,
Cool. But yeah, but I mean, moving once you have your network, then I guess it's a case of actually engaging with it, and I think
yeah,
that's what step 5 is about engaging and being intentional in that network, because it's all very well lining up a bunch of people. It's a bit like having a bunch of really lovely sages, but they're on your bookshelf and never going and reading them.
yeah,
It's like I've got the information, but actually applying it, and they're not really challenging me about how I'm applying that learning.
yeah,
They look lovely on my shelf, and sometimes I look at them and think I must read that. But actually, going to a group and not engaging or being intentional in that group, I think can it's a bit like having a gym membership and never really using it.
yeah. That for sure. And at the other end, we all know that leadership can feel lonely,
Hmm.
and that feeling of loneliness can lead to isolation,
Hmm.
and that's not needed.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the different circles. Your development circle, your safe space to experiment with what you are learning, who you are becoming, is not the same space as where you lead your people in your business, your organization. You want to protect those people from confusing them, experimenting with language, or even maybe offending them.
Mm.
So you need a group of peers that have no stake actually in your fruitfulness, in your results, but are on the same journey, love to experiment, love to give honest feedback, and actually be brutal because they have no stake in your success. Then they will just speak up and just say like, "Oh, I'm really sorry, but what you just said sounds something that has no aspiration for the future. It sounds really about what you have done last year, you know, or sounds like that doesn't sound audacious. That sounds really like risk avoiding instead of experimenting with who you can become, you know." And I say nice, and they are nice people because they are so close to you,
Yeah.
and there is no competition in between. And that's what I call like that's our real peers. And the peer masterminds that involved in, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I'm the host. I know the format.
Yeah.
I have a role in that perspective. um, but at the other end, I learn so much from them.
And I
And
think that's why the book is really good as a preparatory um, uh, setup for coming into something like your mastermind. Because actually, if you come into that, if you come into a peer mastermind and you haven't done some of that preparatory work, then someone challenging you in the way that you just described, I may go away feeling all kind of rejections because I've not really understood the context of why I'm there.
Yeah.
And I may come wanting to be the smartest person in the room from an egoic perspective, but actually the book itself gives you a lovely kind of introduction to that, so that actually by the time you get to step 5 and you're in you're in your mastermind,
Yeah.
being expertly led by Arjan, it's like actually I have the context. I've done my little bit of homework to kind of prepare me for getting into it, and now I can understand why someone uh, might be saying to you, well, actually, I don't really understand that because um, that has no particular aspiration or future perspective. And I wouldn't take it as a personal rejection, but as uh, a, a, um, a helpmate in my
Yeah.
own development.
Well, we use a format, and I've shared in step 6 that even the questions, and they're an introduction to the questions. But one of the questions is when you introduce yourself, of course, it's polite to start with who you are.
Mhm.
So we have a small twist. We introduce ourselves with an I am statement based on who we will have become in 12 months.
Right. Yeah.
Guests that join just to experiment, because it's an experience,
Mhm.
start with being a guest. They will have that question too. They introduce themselves after being involved in listening to others and giving feedback themselves,
Mhm.
because their fresh perspective is of huge value for existing members. But they introduce themselves seen from 12 months from now and who they have become. And then the first question will be, how much of that is today's reality?
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's where the first struggle comes, because it's a struggle to find words to articulate, but also, do I believe it? And can I actually listen to myself when I
Mhm.
put it to words? But that's the personal journey. And this is just the first step. But then the feedback of someone listening to you and just asking you, like, how much of this is what you do today
Mhm.
versus who you will be in 12 months. That whole dynamic that we have about who we are and what we do. Because, like, if we write our resume, it's not about who we are. It's
Yeah.
not even what we do, it's what we did.
Okay.
So it is a summary of skills, and that's also what I addressed at the beginning of the book. This is not about mastery of skills. This is started to live from the inside out
Nice.
and find your authentic self.
Yeah. And I love the fact that there is the opportunity to be a guest, kind of like peek behind the curtain a little bit, and see what's going on in your. And so I would encourage anyone listening to come along as a guest. At least check out first with Arjan what the process is, and then have a peek behind the curtain.
I always do first an introduction call that at least the
Mm.
format structure will not be the question, and that it's fully about the experience. Yeah, thank you for ending there. It was about the book, but you know, if it's about the book, you want to know more about the book or the
Totally.
mastermind, or as a listener, or you, Matt, you have the book. If someone
Indeed.
else wants to read the book and lead the future, the 7 steps to actually expand your future identity, your strategic foresight, and your vision. There's a link at the end of the podcast. It's also in the comments, in the notes of the podcast. It's called businessrevivalist.com/book, where you can just download your own copy or find the link to a physical copy. But also businessrevivalist.com/connect. If you're triggered or have a question or want to connect. Like I always close the podcast with, there must be somewhere a trigger, good, bad, offending, or confirming. but just take the trigger as a trigger and use it to make your next step. And that could be connect. So we just exchange ideas and learn. So Matt, I want to thank you. I survived your questions.
I thought you might.
Yeah, okay. Well, I was a bit not afraid, but no, not at all. Thank you for it, and
Bless you.
it's a pleasure to walk this race, run this race, walk this race. No, cycle this race together.
Crawl.
And I love to invite you again on a podcast in a couple of months
Bless you. I'd love to be here.
for another question. So thank you very much. Have
Take
a
care.
great day, and to all the listeners, just get a copy of the book. It's whatever you decide to pay for it, and but just promise me to connect at the end, so we grow together. Thank you very much, and speak to you soon.